Hello and welcome to the Indie Bandits podcast. I'm Joe and today I'm joined by Jimmy.
Hello.
And Archie.
Ari.
And we're going to be talking about a few indie RPGs we've been playing this month as part of our RPG month and what we thought of them. So I guess we had a quick chat before we started recording and we're gonna do the sort of is it called the shit sandwich? Where you say something nice and then you say something bad and then you say something nice?
Yes,
I guess so. Yeah.
Yes.
I think the PC version is the compliment sandwich.
But that would make the compliment the bread, which you don't call it a bread sandwich.
Oh yeah. Oh well.
I want the sandwiches that Archie's been eating all these years with all the fillings on the outside and the bread in the middle.
It'll be like the what's it called, that Kentucky Fried Chicken thing?
Double down. Double down?
The double down.
Is it double down?
It is the double down. But yes, so I guess we'll do the double down of podcasts.
There we go.
The bread has been replaced with delicious fried indie games. And so tell us what you've been playing, Archie, who made it, when it came out, whatever. Anything you can tell us about it.
I need bother. So I've been playing Costume Quest, which is 10 years old this year, I think, which makes me feel ancient, because I remember when this game came out 10 years ago. It's done by Double Fine. You see how I worked that one out, James? See how I
He's
did
on
the maths
fire
on that
today.
How long ago did this game come out? 10 years ago.
10 years
well,
ago.
That'll make it 10 years old. Brilliant.
But that does make me feel old, man. Made by Double Fine, who isn't indie anymore. They were bought by Microsoft. It was last year or something, so they work under that umbrella now. Regardless, at the time, Double Fine was still an indie company making this game. And what Costume Quest is, it's like a RPG set around Halloween, and you're a pair of like trick-or-treaters. Essentially, you're a pair of trick-or-treaters going out, believe it or not, trick-or-treating, trying to get your sister or your brother back, and who you're trying to get back depends on which character you choose at the start. So it's a brother and sister who are twins. You can choose between one or the other at the start of the game. If you choose the brother, the sister gets kidnapped and vice versa, and that's essentially what the entire story is about. It's called Costume Quest because, yep, like on Halloween, you're two little kids, you wear costumes, but your costumes are also like your abilities and your powers when you get into your typical, it's like typical turn-based combat. Like when you go so when you're in the main gameplay, like the hub world, the costumes just like scruffy and crappy and like anything like a young kid would make. They look like they've like been made out of cardboard and they're dead simple. But when you get into combat, they look like, how they imagine it. So if you're dressed up as the wee robot in the hub world, it's just like this helmet with like a hole cut onto it. Like it's really simple. When you get into combat, it's this massive mech that has this great, like really dramatic opening, and all the attacks are like super powered and everything. And it kind of plays out like that. So it's like really charming. It's like obviously a game for like kids. But, I played it. I'm 32 years old and I had a blast with it. It's got that kind of... have you ever watched, like, Charlie Brown or, like, Peanuts or anything like that? It has that kind of, like, that aesthetic.
Right.
Ah, cool.
And, just really, really charming. The writing's, like, typical. It's written by Tim Schafer, who wrote, like, who runs Double Fine, but he wrote Grim Fandango, the original Monkey Island games, Brutal Legend, Broken Age, and blah, blah, so on and so forth. So, like, everything he writes has got this kind of, like, there's no, like... cynicism or like meanness in his writing. It's all like very sweet and charming, and all the characters are very like likable. It's good. It's very very basic. It is aimed for like a younger audience, but if you wanted your kid to like play an RPG, but you didn't want to give them Oblivion because it might be too complicated, or give them something else because it might be too violent, this is a great game because it has like none of that and everything in it. It's just very sweet and innocent and daft and silly, and it's really charming.
So how does the RPG elements come into it? Because you said obviously you're like questing, so we've got this like sort of like narrative holding the story together.
Okay.
But how does the fighting work? You said the fighting works a bit like that South Park episode where they're playing with ninja weapons.
Yes.
As in they look crappy in the real world, and then when it turns into the action sequences or the fights, they look like they're the real deal.
So it's not like randomized battles that you would see in Final Fantasy VII or name any other JRPG where they have randomized battles. For a lot of the time, like in the initial hub, for instance, like when you're going, one of the initial objectives is to like trick or treat at every single house. So okay, maybe it is a little bit random. So every other house might have the enemy in it. You know what I mean? So you knock on the door, the music swells, and someone could come to the door, but they could just be a regular person. Or if you get one of the monsters who's going around stealing all the candy and who's also stolen your sister or brother, they come to the door and you have to fight them. And it's basically whenever you get in a fight, when you succeed in that fight, you just get given a lot of XP, and that adds to your level, and that typical of RPG improves your attacks, and well, yeah, essentially does that. It just improves your attack power and your health, etc. But as you go through the game, you have to collect other costumes. So it's all about getting more costumes. The different types of costumes you have change the type of attacks or abilities you have in combat. So each character has a special, like they would in Final Fantasy VII, where in this you've got missile barrages, or you would have something that would heal the entire party. So it's not doing anything new in the terms of RPG mechanics. In fact, it's probably taking them and simplifying them down so anybody could just pick up and play them. But what it is doing, it's taking the entire concept of RPGs, which is usually a big grand, save the world kind of adventure, and making it incredibly simple and in a lot of ways much more interesting.
I love how they've taken a basic concept of people dressing up on Halloween and turned that into an RPG, making your costume better, upgrading your costume. I think that's a great idea.
It's awesome. I was reading about it as well. The game's only 5 hours long or something, so it's very, very short. But it seemed like when they were making it, they were trying to bring back that idea of having games having a bit of a quick turnaround. Because I think the game that preceded this one, at Double Fine, was Brutal Legend, which was a big project that had Jack Black in it. And it was all about metal, and it was kind of an action game and an open world game. But that was the guitar. Yeah,
I remember that.
That was in development for 6 years or something ridiculous like that. And this game was turned around in less than a year, from what I'm aware. And obviously, this game doesn't look maybe at the time it looked a bit better than it does now. We're coming into this 10 years on, as I mentioned earlier, and but it still has that cel shaded appeal, and all the characters are just super simple. So it looks quite blocky and all that, but it still looks really, really nice. And
good aesthetic rather than good graphics.
Yeah, exactly that. I just really liked it. It's just, I've just finished playing The Last of Us, which is this big horrible. I like the game, but horrible is in terms of its tone. It's very serious, very gruesome, very gory, and I'm jumping from that to this, which is incredibly sweet, about kids just going on a wee adventure. And it's quite nice to see that they're taking a tried concept of RPGs and just dumbing it down to something, I don't know, incredibly American, but not about saving the world. It's like a Cartoon Network show that you're playing, or a Charlie Brown episode that you're playing.
Like Ed, Edd and Eddy. Do you remember that? Oh.
Yeah. I've never been trick-or-treating before, so this was essentially my first trick-or-treating experience.
Oh.
My mum would never take me out trick-or-treating. She didn't believe in it. She was like, nope, you can't just go around scrounging sweets off of the people.
That's not quite what it is, but anyway.
It's sort of, well, no, it's not scrounging sweets, it's extorting them under the threat of violence, essentially. It's you don't want to know what we might do if you don't give us sweets. So, just give us the sweets.
I remember it being a lot more innocent than that.
Yes, it probably was, but...
Yeah, but I don't know, maybe I see in TV and in films that, if someone refuses to give them sweets or doesn't have sweets, then you, egg or TP their house. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much this goes on, because, as we mentioned,
I don't think
all of our understanding of, American trick-or-treating is from TV and film, so...
Yeah.
But I never saw that happen in the UK. It would just be sorry, we don't have any sweets, or sorry, we're all out, and then people would be like, all right, sorry to bother you, and then they move on the most British way to trick-or-treat anyway. Or, like us, going, no, it's begging, and my mum would just take me to family members' houses, and they would pretend they didn't know who I was, even though I was, with me mum, or whatever. It was right, we'll go round your aunts now, we'll go round your grands, we'll go see granddad or whatever, and then you trick-or-treat them, and then they, they go, oh, who's that? It's really scary. Here's some sweets, the exact allocated amount of sweets that they were always going to give us. So, I don't know. Does it transfer? Archie has no frame of reference, but do you think it actually is Like,
Well,
does it capture the joy of what an experience you've never had before? You think?
yes,
it would feel
definitely does. Well, no, it just captures kind of like what that event is portrayed like on American television. The way I've always seen it, at least. There's no tricks in it. You can't like go egg somebody's house. You can only like knock on the doors, you get sweets, or you get into a combat situation. But it's all portrayed like the way it would be on television.
So if they don't give you sweets, you kill them.
Well, no, that doesn't happen. But yeah.
So do they die, or do you just win? Like, what's the
What do you mean? Does who
what's
die?
the outcome of battles? Like, if you have a fight or a battle, what is the outcome of the battle?
Oh, the enemy just disappears. Like there's they just
Final
burst
Fantasy
into
style,
a
like,
pile
just
of like sweets. Like there's no death if in it, you know, like
Other than bursting into a pile of sweets.
other than bursting into a pile of sweets. But yeah, it's played very innocently. Like they don't like drop to the floor and like gargle their last breath or anything like that.
A cheeky death rattle is that like vomiting up candy. Oh.
But yeah, you just move through the game like that. Like they get into more like linear sections when you're moving from one hub to the other. So the second hub, you know, spoiler alert for a game that's 10 years old, is the mall, and the mall's opened up, like, and they're having trick-or-treating there as well, and there's loads of different kids just, like, hanging out there. I guess to, like, vary the environment so you're not in, like, a suburban street the entire time. But when you get there as well, there's, like, mini-games as well, where you can go, like, what's it, bobbing for apples? Is that what it's called? Yeah, we can do that, and you just get some sweets, like, for doing that. And yeah, sweets is essentially a currency, so you can find, like, a vendor as well, who's like, there's a little girl who basically sells you stamps, and your stamps are essentially your perks that you bring into battle, and each character can have one stamp, and they would be like, oh, extra damage, or when you can have splash damage, so if you hurt somebody, it hurts all the enemies in battle, you know, as well.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just good fun.
Is it turn-based?
Yeah, it's turn-based, yeah. Typical, like, JRPG rules kind of thing. But yeah, really fun, daft, silly, but incredibly charming. Like, you know, it's a perfect game if you've got a kid and you're like, do you want some of them to play? That isn't, like, benign and boring and badly made. Like, this game's great, because it's just really nice. And as far as I'm aware, you can get it almost everywhere as well. I think if they made it into a TV series, or like a YouTube TV series, like an animated show, like, but I don't know. But it's one of those things that would just translate really well, and like the writing's like really nice and like really like fun. It could easily like be plopped into like another medium and probably like survive like pretty well.
How is the writing? I know you said it was Tim Schafer, right? And from the list of games you said that were his, it's I think you've played quite a few of them, right?
Yeah.
I haven't played, like, I don't think I've played a single one. No, I briefly played Grim Fandango.
You played Monkey Island?
Nah, I think Grim Fandango is the only one I've played, and even then I've probably spent an hour on it and just never went back to it. And I know people say it's like amazing and stuff, but I don't know if this is one of those things where I came to that game like, I don't know how old
25 years too late, maybe.
Maybe this is what I'm thinking. It like I played that game for the first time maybe a couple of years ago, and was it the HD remake, HD remaster or something? It wasn't a remake, was it? I don't know. It was that like HD upgrade, version. Yeah, this HD upgrade version that was made free on PlayStation, wasn't it? I think it was a PS Plus game. And I don't know. It's one of those things where I was like, this could be cool, but it like, I don't know how well it's aged, and I don't know. One, I haven't played any games really much like that in my life. Nor did I play this at the time it came out. So I think it was a big ask of me to like really take to it. I might go back and like revisit it and give it a go. And most people are probably like screaming, going, "You should." But I don't know. Like, how does Costume Quest stack up against?
The story's like different. Like Grim Fandango's good despite its controls, kind of thing. Like, given the time it came from, Grim Fandango is just a story game with some puzzles in it, and the puzzles are good. But in this day and age, you know, I think people want a little bit more out of like. I mean, I don't care. I think I'd happily have a good story and some puzzles to keep me going. The writing's different because the tone's different, but for me, it still works and does what it needs to do. And there's less writing because the game's shorter, and like Grim Fandango is very cinematic. Like, at least it was for the time. I mean, I think it still holds up in a lot of ways. This game isn't. This game's like a lot more like reduced, but even like with the dialogue and the writing, it's still very, very good to me. It just does everything it needs to do, and it does it like nicely. The only thing it's missing is none of the characters are voice acted, so it's all just like written speech bubbles, which is fine again. But yeah, it's just a little one thing. Like if it had that extra thing and it had like good voice acting, it'd be like, oh, that's an extra little point you would give it.
Did you ever play Earthbound? Because
Nope.
this is the kind of vibes I'm getting. That is that game is much grander in terms of like the story it covers, but at the end of the day, it's still just like a bunch of kids milling around their neighborhood.
Yeah, like there's not many games that just take like a concept like this. So you got Earthbound and you've got Costume Quest, and there's Costume Quest 2 as well, which I haven't played, where it just takes like kids and puts them on an adventure, and it feels like stuff like Spielberg did back in the day with was it the Goonies and all that, and like E.T., where it's more like kids way out of their depth in a certain situation, and like Stranger Things has just come out, and that's kind of like popular, and I think it's made a comeback last year, and there's a lot of appeal putting more naive people into a bigger
The unlikely
situation.
hero.
Yeah, unlikely hero stuff like that. I think it adds a little bit more charm to stuff.
I mean, I think the idea is that like the heroes are often meant to be unlikely, at least at the start, unless you're buying into like the superhero narrative, and it's just like, yeah, these guys are obviously the hero, but then it seems that fans prefer the origin stories of them anyway. So maybe we need a return to people who shouldn't really be heroes at all.
Yeah, possibly. It's quite funny as well when you're playing through back to the writing again, because your brother and sister. There's all these like daft little lines about like the sister gets taken, and he's like, the kid's more bothered about getting into trouble off his parents because the sister's gone missing more than anything else. And that's what he keeps going on about. He's like, oh, she's gone and she's ruining my Halloween because she went and got abducted and all that. And if I tell Mom that my sister's gone, I'm going to be grounded for a month. It's like, I like how that's kind of like more at the forefront of his mind than anything else. The fact that's just missing.
Like kid logic.
Yeah, it's so funny though. It's like, it's so sweet. Like, there's one bit like she's not yours to take. I know she's annoying and everything, but she's my sister and you can't take her. It's like, oh, this is really cute. Like, no, it's great. It's it's just a really nice game. It's very simple. Like, you're not gonna ever be like challenged in it, I don't think. But I don't think it's ever trying to do that. It's just like, here's a little mini game, very very short, very very simple, but not like it's so fun, even with all that stuff in. Like, it's great, good fun, and it's probably cheap as shit these days as well, because it's how long's it been out for? 10 years. So like, yeah, you could probably pick it up pretty cheap now if you wanted to, have a Halloween-themed game to just knock on for a few hours.
To take you through the middle of summer.
Yeah.
Why not? Why not?
Why not,
I think all time has lost meaning this year, hasn't it?
It certainly has.
I don't think we need to worry
yeah.
about seasons and events. So
2020 needs to do with it, to be honest.
the 2020 HD remake is coming out
Yeah, we
next
certainly
year.
need that. 100%.
We'll leave Costume Quest there, and then we'll move on to the I guess the shit part of our shit sandwich that we're doing today. And
I think that's a bit harsh.
well, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe it'll be like, what was the game that you started talking about, saying it wasn't very good, and then convinced yourself it was really good by the end it was dusk?
No, I didn't say it wasn't very good. I said that I didn't enjoy it maybe as much as some other fans of that genre would have. But yes, like, I actually realised it was pretty good.
Nice.
I appreciated it more anyway when I was talking about it than I did when I was playing it, I guess. And I'm not sure that's going to be the case here, though.
Oh, no.
Okay, so what have you been playing? What is it?
I've been playing Pyre, which is Supergiant's follow-up to Transistor. And just for some context, I thought Bastion and Transistor were fantastic games. So jumping into this, I was thinking, all right, okay, even if it's a little bit samey, I know what I'm going to be getting, and it's probably going to be a solid game. The stuff that does move over as being just as good, if not better, is the visuals of the game. It looks really, really good. Some effects they've put on, and the maps that you move around on, the character drawings, everything like that is absolutely spot on. And then we get to the actual sorry, I was just saying, like the story was kind of cool as well. What I've explored so far, the characters are cool, the dialogue's interesting. A lot of different elements of things you can. There's obviously a lot of lore gone into it, so you can find out a little bit more by reading books and hovering over certain words in the text. So, like, if a certain character says something, there's sometimes a word that's different color. You can hover over that, and it'll tell you a little bit more about that character or that thing that they're talking about. In one case, it's actually to figure out what someone's saying, you have to keep clicking the unintelligible nonsense that they come out with until your character learns how to talk their language, and then he understands what they're saying. So there's a lot of interactive elements within the dialogue, and like it's like they did all of that, and then for some reason came up with what the game actually is, the actual action part of it, because I would call this an action role-playing game, and it's sort of RPG light. I would not call this like typical RPG. And it's not for me at all. It's not for me. It feels like they've decided to throw a sports game in the middle of an RPG.
All right.
In what way?
So what is it? Yeah, that's what is the game?
So, without going into too much detail about the reasons why, occasionally as you travel around the map, you have to fight or compete against random other. I'm just going to call them gangs for the purposes of this, just to keep it simple. You're in a group of people, and then you meet other groups of people, and you have to compete to progress, I guess. Everyone in this world has been banished to this world, and everyone is competing to try and get out of this banishment.
Right.
And I think what would have worked really well at this point is just a nice, solid RPG battle element. It could have been something similar to Bastion or something similar to Transistor, but instead they decided to put you in a 3v3 situation. So you can pick 3 of your characters. I believe by the time I finished, I was up to 4 or 5 characters that I could choose from, against 3 of the other team's characters, and you're on a little grid or a pitch game area. You're at one side, they're at the other. You have a pyre burning. That's where the game's name comes from.
Very good.
And they have a pyre burning, and your objective is to extinguish their pyre. You can do that by collecting a ball that drops into the gaming area and putting the ball into their pyre.
Like a basketball net.
It reminded me. Do you remember Gladiators in the 90s?
Yes. And you mean the TV show Gladiators in the 90s?
Yes,
not
yeah,
just general like Roman gladiators, but back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Yes.
There was a level in that level. There was a game in that where you had to you had to grab a ball and evade the other gladiators, and then put the ball in like in a
basket.
Yeah, but not like a basketball
trolley.
basket. Yeah, like a sort of like waist high basket.
Yeah, like a supermarket trolley or something.
It's that. Imagine that. That's what it is. You are avoid.
So like handball, basically. If you know the
pretty
sport,
much.
handball.
Yeah. And every time you throw the ball into their pyre, it takes off a certain number of points. If they go down to 0, their pyre's extinguished. You win the level. And depending on the character you use to put the ball in the pyre, you can get more points off or less points. So the quicker, faster characters take off less points. The bigger, heavier characters, which are harder to evade, or harder to sort of sneak through and get through, take off more points. But
so it's like rugby, this game almost.
Sort
like,
of. When you, so
like an American football, rugby, gladiators, handball hybrid game of just 3v3 teams.
3v3.
Trying to get a ball into a net or goal or
into a small
objective.
circle at the other end. So everyone's got like a circle on either end with a fire burning from the circle. You just got to run into the fire, basically. The ball drops in the middle of the pitch when you start the level. The levels have obstacles on them, so it's not just a case of like running straight backwards forwards. You got to get through the obstacles, but to be honest, it's like very simple. So every character has an aura around them. Depending on the speed of the character and the sort of, I guess, stamina of the character, the aura can start off quite small or get quite large. When you don't have the ball, your aura surrounds your character, and if anyone from the other side wanders into that aura, they are banished. So you can run around, that's your like defensive control area. You can run into the other players when they have the ball, and it banishes them. And they're banished for a certain amount of time, and then they respawn in the game after a few seconds.
So it's like a tackle, I guess.
It
like
is,
you tackle them and they're down for a certain period of time, and then they get back up and put back into the play area.
Yeah, they drop the ball, you pick the ball up. The second you pick the ball up, your aura disappears, and you are like super vulnerable to running into someone else's aura. You can...
They capture the flag, then.
Yeah. You can sprint, you can jump. Characters have different types of jumps. You'll love it, Archie. Then there is... Oh yeah, and you can shoot like your aura forwards as well. So you can sort of stay very stationary and use an attack that fires the aura forward, so you can get someone as they're running past you, type of thing. And
rather than waiting for them to come into your sphere
or
of
trying to
influence.
run into them yourself. Yes, you can just like. And
you
obviously,
have like ranged attacks.
The bigger the character, the wider that sort of attack is.
Area of effect. Yeah.
And you can also use that same button to shoot the ball into the pyre, but you always get less points if you shoot the ball rather than actually run into it yourself. One thing's really cool is like this God voice all the way through it, and that sounds really cool. They've done that really, really well. There's obviously this like very sort of Soul Reaver, the Elder God type thing going on in the background. That's cool. But the game itself is just like, I just didn't get it. I felt like I was playing some like really watered down version of like an NBA game.
Right.
And to me, it does not fit at all with the rest of the game. It feels like you're playing a completely different game when you jump into this. I don't get what the creative decision behind it was. Maybe someone can explain to me what that was, but it doesn't fit at all. It's so jarringly different from what the rest of the game is that when the battles happen, I just don't care. I'd rather be listening to all the other stuff and like exploring the map and meeting all the new characters and talking to them and stuff. That bit's cool.
This sounds like the opposite of Archie's game, where Archie, you described like, very mundane and normal characters in a sense, and I don't mean like bad. I mean just like everyday people in like really exciting situations. Mm-hmm. And what it sounds like your game has been, Jim, is a really exciting scenario with like exciting characters in this exciting world, doing a really like mundane scenario where it's like instead of having like a big epic fight, they're just shooting hoops with their mates.
I mean, I'm sure someone might find it exciting. It's not like it's slow paced or anything. You're running around in that. But if I'm being perfectly honest, I felt like I gamed the system almost straight away. I had my big guy sat right on top of me pyre with his huge aura, so no one could run into it unless they shot it. And then I just had my little one, the really, really speedy one, just nip around and score all the points. And I don't know if the AI is just not very good in it, but they don't track you very well. So I just like bolted around the outside of the level and just ran into the pyre over and over again. Sometimes when I fancied it, I changed it up and I used the bigger character to do something. But I don't know, I just was like so unengaged in the actual competitive element of the game that I just wanted to get it over with as quickly as I possibly could to get back to the story and find out more about the characters you're with at the start, the characters you pick up along the way. Getting to the map and like choosing, you choose which direction you're going in. You're reading all these books to find out more about how to, get yourself escaped from this world of being banished. That bit's cool. As I said, the actual the art style of it looks fantastic.
Is it much of the same? Because I know they've got a very distinct style, and I've seen.
Yes.
I played Bastion, played Transistor. I've seen a lot of the stuff they've been doing with No Clip Hades, and the art style is this isometric, sort of like nicely painted.
So because
world and characters.
Yeah, because this game doesn't involve you. So it's not like Bastion and Transistor in that you're moving around all the time across a map. The only time you're engaging with any movement and actually controlling a character, I guess, is in the competitive basketball bit. All the other bits, you're just clicking on. It's like point and click.
Right.
And it's like a map. But the map, I said, like the actual like visuals of it, I think it's like you could probably call it a mix between Bastion and Transistor, really. No science fiction elements, but like the characters in Bastion were perhaps a little bit more cartoony than they were in Transistor.
They were little dumpy, like big-headed things, weren't they? With
it's
like
probably like the characters are more Transistor, but the world is more Bastion.
Right. So they're like more realistic in their like dimensions and proportions.
But it feels more like fantasy and folksy. Fantasy and folksy is like the map and the style, but the characters are definitely more Transistor than Bastion. And there's a lot to like in terms of the creative elements of this game. I just did not enjoy it felt very clunky to play it as well. Very clunky. I'm disappointed by it, if I'm being honest, because I really loved the last two games. So
I'm just looking at a review here on Steam for it, like the user reviews. And someone has said, this game plays out like a slower, tedious version of basketball. Would you agree with that, James?
I would agree. It's like, I genuinely would love to know what the creative decision was behind putting that element into this game, because as I said, it just is so jarringly different to the rest of the game that I do not get it. There was this one moment of like a mini game where a character joins you and she's kind of helping you get around, and then she has to defend the wagon that you're in from these creatures that are attacking you, and it uses the same idea as the let's just call it the basketball game, where your character has an aura and you are defending the wagon from these creatures by either running into them or like shooting your aura at these guys, and it just banishes them, and you've got to try and defend the caravan or the wagon, from as many of them as possible before the round ends. And like that was a little bit more interesting. That felt a little bit more like Bastion, and you're just fighting hordes of enemies and like you're using your attacks and stuff, and it felt a little bit like that. But it feels like Transistor was like in terms of the way they fight in Transistor was a level up from Bastion. It had all the elements of Bastion, but it added like that extra element of strategy to it as well.
Yeah, you could combine the abilities, right? It had that cool slot thing, didn't it? And you could add slots. You'd use... Oh, what were they called? So you had your weapons and attacks. Were they called like programs or functions?
I think so.
They were called functions, right? Because it was a whole like programming thing. Yeah, and you could combine functions to features and stuff like that, and
and
then the order you combined them would affect your attacks in like new and unique ways, leaving you with like hundreds of potential combinations.
Yeah, and that felt to me like an evolution of the Bastion system. Like you could play Transistor like you'd played Bastion if you wanted, but you also had this extra element. This game feels like it was like pre-Bastion. Like they hadn't even
a step backwards,
a massive step back. I don't know what the... Like, you two should just play this just so you can share your opinion with me after this, but you don't even have to play much. You get straight into the whole, like, battling basketball thing straight away. But when the game starts, you get a very... I don't want to, like, ruin the story or anything, so I'm not going to talk about what the story is, but apart from, like, the banishment thing. But you get a very quick idea of what that's all about. It's very similar to Transistor and Bastion, that you don't know who you are, really. Like, your background hasn't been fleshed out. It's not like you are the princess of this world and you have to, like, you come into it a little bit like your character's vague, and I'm assuming the more I would play the game, the more I would learn about myself as much as the other characters in there. So it's similar like that. And the world looks great. The idea behind it, cool. I like it. That like Elder God thing going on, that was really cool. But the actual like competitive element of this is just so skippable. And forgettable. How
much of the game does that take up? Like the
you tend to do maybe like a third of what I've played, maybe a little bit less. So like there's a lot of time you have to figure out where you're going. You have to figure out you can buy and sell stuff, so you can buy items that upgrade your characters. Your characters do level up and they become faster or stronger, or they respawn quicker, or various different things that interact with the game, the actual basketball game. I've got to remember what it's actually called, because calling it a basketball game seems ridiculous. But like, so your characters can improve. You can. There's lots of different elements as well. So you can choose to read more. So in between between the two. So when you get to a different area, that's where you fight a new group of people. So you have to get from one place to another. And on your travels, you meet new people. You learn new things. You can upgrade your characters. You can buy stuff. You can sell stuff. You can mentor your characters to speed them up faster and like get them better at certain things quicker, and develop relationships with them and all that sort of stuff. So all that stuff's really well thought out. Like, well done. This bit's great. Like that feels like an evolution, right? That feels like an evolution of Bastion and Transistor. There's more characters. You're in a party. You can do stuff with them, interact with the world a little bit more, because in Bastion and Transistor you're kind of just running around a set world, and this is bigger in scope, what it wants to do. That all feels like an evolution and really, really good. And then every so often you have to do these fights and it's like, holy crap, what the hell is this? And I just didn't like it at all. I thought the first time I thought like, oh, I'll get over it. And once I get used to the game, I'll be fine with it. But after a few hours, I'm just like, no, I'm not enjoying this bit at all. Everything else, yes, that, no.
So do you reckon a modded version of this game that lifted all the basketball bits out would probably be significantly better? Or do you think that would just leave the game with not enough to it?
There wouldn't be enough, because it would be a point and click game other than that. You're not moving any, like your decisions are click to read that book and learn that thing, choose to go that direction, or choose to interact with that character, or level up that character, or buy that item. That's all you're doing in the non-battle screen. You're not controlling a character and moving him around.
So it's just management at that point.
Yes, but all of that would be really nice, and it is really nice, if there was I would have just really enjoyed a typical turn-based RPG battle system type thing in this case, and I understand they want to maybe they want to do something a little bit different, but that would have been different for them because they don't have that. They haven't had that in those previous games. It's a real time thing, and this is a real time thing as well. But I don't know. I don't think it's very good. And I'd say real time, like you've got 3 characters, but you can only ever control one character at a time as well. The other characters are stationary when you're not controlling them, so it just doesn't feel very like it fits. Like even in itself, even in that game, the game itself, it hasn't been particularly well thought out in my opinion. Like you could say like, oh well, it shouldn't be in the game because it doesn't feel like it's part of this world. But if that was a really tight experience as well and really fun, you'd be like, all right, fair enough. I don't get why these basketball matches are in this world, but at least they're fun. At least like it's a really fluid, fun, like well thought out experience. But even then, the game itself is just a little bit. You can control one character at a time; the others just stand still, and then when you pass the ball, you can move another one. So
they don't even like follow you around and
No.
like in a game of FIFA where they'd like sort of run in position and make sense of it all. These guys are just empty vessels until you control them.
Yeah, and I didn't see much from the AI as well. Now I was just playing it on the standard difficulty. I wasn't playing on hard because I just wanted to jump in and have an idea of what it was like and not sort of like screw myself over from the first minute. But I had one character. I was just charging around the outside the entire game. No one followed us. I'm just thinking, bloody hell, this is. There's not much of a challenge. The controls are clunky, in my opinion. I had to remap the entire control system to fit what I would do. I don't get it. The rest of the game, great. That element of it completely ruins the experience for me. Because you have to do that bit. You have to. There's no getting around it.
Yeah, and that's the like sort of like core gameplay element of the game. Everything else is like management leading up to that bit, right?
Yeah, because that's the bit where you progress. That's the bit where you unlock the new area. That's the bit where the tension is, where the risk is, you know. like in the battle systems of all RPGs, that's where the tension ramps up. That's where you want to be, because that's the fun, exciting part. That's the bit you've led your characters and upgraded them to get to that point, so you can beat that group of guys and move on. This is like, oh my god, I don't want to do this.
What a shame. I was kind of interested in that game as well. I mean, I'll probably still check it out, but
I'd be intrigued to hear what you two have to say about it, to be honest, because yeah.
you do, I mean, when you mentioned basketball, like my interest couldn't drop off quicker.
It's not basket. It's not basket. It's handball, gladiator basketball. That's what it is.
Well, that sounds a bit more interesting, but
It sounds a bit like. Do you remember the game Speedball on the Mega Drive? Did you ever?
I never played that. No.
I never had a Mega Drive.
You would, Jimmy. You would have played that. I had that on.
Oh right, okay. I don't remember it then. No.
It's a top down like version of handball with these like guys who look like RoboCop, like running around smashing into each other. And
what is handball?
Handball is just like football, but you run around, and it's using a smaller ball that the players hold in their hand. And
so rugby.
No, it's you throw the ball into a net.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's really popular in continental Europe, but is never like taken off in the UK. But yeah, it's like it's played on a smaller pitch with smaller teams. But imagine like a five-a-side football pitch. Like I can just watch Archie's eyes glaze over now as I explain sports. But basically, if you've seen a five-a-side football pitch, that's what like handball's played on, and then people just run around with a like a round ball, as opposed to like the egg-shaped ones of rugby and American football, and try and throw that into a net, but like a football net.
Excellent.
And this sounds like what Pyre is, but like 3-on-3 sort of thing. It's just.
I would say it is, yeah. Except you can actually run your character into the net. It's handball, except you can run your character into the net.
So not recommended. James,
I don't know. I mean, I guess if you've been a fan of Bastion and Transistor, you've got to try it out, because you might love the other elements so much that you can overlook that. But for me, I did really like those other elements. I said I've only played a little bit, but I want to know more about the characters. I want to explore all that. I want to find out more about the world and spend more time in it, because it looks amazing. But every so often, I'm forced to do this really weird sports game in the middle of this RPG in a fantasy world. I'm just like, what on earth is this? It's so weird, honestly. Just try it. It's so weird.
So just a swing and a miss from the guys at Supergiant on this one.
Yes.
They've tried something new. It hasn't worked. I mean, I think that's understandably why they did not go back to this idea for the follow-up Hades. I think Hades goes much more... It's much more combat orientated. The newest one. I think that's an early access thing they're doing. So
I mean, I could applaud them for trying something new. You two are just going to have to. And if anyone's listening to this and wants to share their opinion, what they thought as well, I'd be really interested to hear it, because it's a weird combination of things in a game.
I'd like to hear the opinions of those who've played it and liked it.
Yeah.
Archie.
It seems like it gets a lot of good reviews. I was just saying there, it's very highly reviewed, bar like a couple things here and there.
But it seems like the people who don't like it for the same
similar reasons to
Jim.
James. It seems like
that is the only thing I didn't like about it. Yeah, but it's a big enough element that it puts me off.
Yeah, understandable.
Let's get the fried chicken bread of our podcast, and we'll move on to the game that I've been playing. It's the Double Down. Where the bread was replaced with 2 pieces of fried chicken. And that's what we're doing, except this, instead of the fried chicken in the middle, we had a turd. So, I've been playing Moonlighter, which is so it's an RPG, but it's again very much on like the action side of RPG, in that you don't have your battle, as it were. It's not like a turn-based battle thing. It's very much it like controls like Zelda and these like kind of top-down action-adventure RPG games. But the main difference is that the character is the shop owner in the town. You know, the traditional like RPG shop owner guy where you walk in, he has his wares, and you know, you smash the pots in his store for no reason. You play as that guy. And on an evening when the shop's closed, you go into randomly generated dungeons to kill baddies and like nick loot off them.
Right.
and then you sell that during the day. So there's two parts of this game, and there's the like running the shop, which is a bit like business sim, and then you have the ARPG elements, which is going into randomly generated dungeons and fighting, and like it's sort of one side helps the other because the money you make from the shop is what you use to pay like other merchants and craftsmen to upgrade weapons and armor and stuff like that, so that you can go deeper into dungeons because that's where the better loot is. And it's got this in its very very. I don't want to say grindy because we spoke about grindy in the last episode.
And you pissed
But
off
it
half
is-
of
it's
Twitter
what-
as well.
Yes, but this is but the game is sort of like a grind loop, but it's one of these loops where you just you get a little bit further, you do a little bit better, you upgrade your stuff, and then you go at it again. And it's very much like it's rogue light. There isn't like permadeath, but there is like all your progress is lost in a run into the dungeon.
Right.
So it's cool. So you head into X dungeon, and it's a case of if you die, everything you've like collected is gone in that run. So it's like you've always got to know like playing like roulette or gambling. You've got to know when to quit, or you could lose it all.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, this is something like I love in games when the risk versus reward is nicely balanced. I've had discussions about Dark Souls and that with Archie, and that game does a very good kind of like risk versus reward, but it doesn't work well with the levels of risk and reward I like, which causes me to play it in a really boring way. But this game, you're not too bothered. At least I wasn't too bothered if I died and lost a load of loot, because it's kind of like, yeah, you're only in these dungeons for like a handful of minutes. It's not like you're in these dungeons for like a whole hour and then you lose all that progress. It's like, no, you're in for a few minutes because there's only so much you can hold in your little backpack, which, is upgradable, etc. But, so you loot, you go to the shop, you spend it's like a little mini game in the shop as well, which is cool, where basically you just open the shop, you've put all the stuff out, and you've said what their prices are, and then adventurers come in, typical, like, what you'd expect, like, characters from Zelda, or some guys look a bit Final Fantasy-esque and stuff, and have, like, a massive sword on their back, and they walk in the shop, and they look at your wares, and then there's a little, like, emoticon reaction to the price. So some of them are like that little emoticon with their eyes lighting up and filled with gold coins, and that's like, damn, that's a cheap item, what a bargain. And then the game, like, automatically notes that down for you to tell you, like, your price was, like, way too cheap and they thought it was a bargain. And basically, whilst people are shopping, you've got to be, like, altering your prices based on, like, the reactions of the customers to make sure that you're charging them as much as you possibly can without charging so much that they just go, I don't want it.
Right.
And then there's, like, these, like the laws of economics apply. So if you keep, like, flogging the same shit, it starts to devalue. So you've got to, like, resist, like, just keep throwing out the same product, even if it, like, earns you a lot of money, because the more people that buy it, they're like, oh, there's a massive supply of this product.
Yeah.
And then they start thinking it's too expensive. So the prices fluctuate as well. So there's this whole, like, management sim, business sim mini game, which is probably not half of the game, but a large portion of it, maybe like 40% of the game. It depends how long you spend looting in dungeons, but like half of the game is business sim and half of it is like action RPG with roguelite elements. So it's different. It's a combination. For me, the combination works because it's kind of like they're two sides of the same coin. And at least in world, it like makes sense. I mean, the game's called Moonlighter, and you're moonlighting, and the name of the shop is the Moonlighter, and like literally, it's like, yes, we get it, you're moonlighting, like, cool. Now, but this works. Like in a kind of RPG world, you go, how does the shop always have stuff? I'm out all day adventuring, and every time I go into a shop, it's still got loads of wares. Like, I got loads of gold coins and then bought loads of stuff from this shop, and next time I go in, the dude's got like this amazing sword that he didn't have last time. Like, where does he get it from? And this kind of like, very tongue-in-cheek jokingly sort of suggests that, these people just like barely sleep.
Yeah.
They're even better, and the shopkeepers are even better adventurers than the real adventurers, and the adventurers are just like these McGubbins who walk in going, yes, I'm going to buy the best sword, and you're like, this dude had to kill a massive monster to get his hands on that sword. You have no idea. And it looks really good as well, and here we go. It's the indie pixel art train. Everyone get on board. But it is beautifully animated. Like, this is where it really differs. Like, the pixel art's nice, but it's when the pixel art's in motion where you're like, oh, these guys cared about it. Like, there's a lot of Archie, you know your shiz about animation, but there's just things like, strong lines, good anticipation when you do an attack. This like nice like follow through when you've got like a big sword, like a Claymore-esque thing. There's a good like, even just like, it's like cost-effective animation almost, like, holding on the pose before he does a big like spinny attack. Just to like, as it's building up, and there's like even just little things like, the character flickers as you're building up, and as you release, then there's like, big what are they called? Are they called smears, Archie?
I know what you mean,
like
where you kind of like stretch out the drawing.
You draw like a blurred version, or like these like action lines around the sword. Like it all works very well, and there's some really nice stuff with like goop. There's a lot of jelly-esque baddies in it as well, and they move around really cool. And then the bosses are this big kind of like, this huge like room-sized pixel art enemy with like all the parts like animated as well. It's cool. Like, each arm is like, the fingers are animated on the like hands of these giant beasties and stuff. So it looks really good, and it's a game that you could sit and watch someone play and just be like,
okay,
wow, this is beautiful. And it's well presented. It's got a nice soundtrack as well. The music sounds cool. Standard fare, but it was nice. There was not too bothered by it, but sort of like humming along the melody that plays as you're like watching people pot around your shop.
Who makes it?
I think they were called Digital Suns.
No, I haven't heard of them.
Digital Sun, S-U-N, and this is the only game they've made.
Oh wow, okay.
It's a Spanish indie dev studio, and they made this a couple of years ago. Early 2018, it was released. At the end of the year, they released the Switch version of it, and then a bit later, I think there's some DLC for it as well. But this is like the only thing this studio's made. But for a first foray into the world of indie game development, like this is a really, really strong product. And
sounds it.
It could. I mean, if I had to criticize it, it might fall flat for some people, because anyone who like wants a more like intense experience, then it's lacking. It's very much like on the casual end of the spectrum. Like, I can sit and play it, and it's very much one of these great games where I was saying, like, it's a nice, like, switch your brain off kind of game. Now, you do have to think about it, and it can be quite challenging, because the combat is not entirely forgiving. But it's, it does have that nice balance between, like, the combat and then the shop bit, where the shop bit is, like, yeah, I get a little bit annoyed when I put something out, and I'm like, haha, 200 gold for that, motherfuckers. And then the guy buys it and it's like, what a steal. And you're like, oh, fuck you, no. I didn't realize I could have like charged double for that. This is the first time I've ever seen one of these things. I don't even know what it is. That's the kind of way it works. And you're like, I'm like, gold runes. I mean, they're gold, so I'll charge a bit for them. But surely they can't be worth more than like gold. And then it turns out these things can be like sold for like 500 coins, and I sold them for like 10 coins. You're like, oh no, what a loss. But between the shop and the dungeon crawling, as it were, it's a nice balance between, like, you have this brief moment of like high intensity stuff, especially when it comes to the boss fights, and knowing that like everything can be lost. It's high intensity, but not necessarily really stressful. the combat plays very much in your kind of classic like Dark Souls-esque. Like you have an attack. If you've got a shield, you have a shield button, and then you have the
Lots
the
of
classic
rolling.
the roll button. Yeah, that's the roll button does everything. The roll button jumps over like gaps. The roll button avoids attacks. The roll button can like roll through like projectiles as well, and you don't get hit. Basically, as you're rolling, you're invulnerable. You can't be hit or harmed by anything. But obviously, if you end your roll over like a bottomless pit, you fall into it and are like lose a bit of health for it. One of the big criticisms I'd give it is that the levels are very much, you have your rectangular room with like it's randomly generated whether there's like a door to the north, south, east, and west. Sometimes there's multiple doors out, but every like arena in which you fight is just this like screen-sized rectangle.
Right.
And they can get very, very samey. Now there are different like biomes, so you know there's a different lick of paint on them, but essentially it's always you're just in this rectangle arena. And some like, you know, in maybe the order in which they put like the bottomless pits on the floor will mix it up a little bit. But you're always just moving around this arena, and I think this is quite common for games like it. But
yeah, I was gonna say actually, like, for somebody like me who's not the biggest fan of procedurally generated levels, is it still like fun despite that? Because what you've said there is the exact same thing we said about Void Bastards. I'm sure we've mentioned it on other procedurally generated levels in the past, where there's an infinite number of things that can come out of it, but not really, because everything ends up looking the same at the same, like, because they've only got limited assets that they can, like, you know, reuse.
Yeah.
there's no like real character to the levels you go into. You just, every time you enter like X dungeon, you go, what am I going to get this time? It's, you know, it's as if they had a deck of cards and just laid them all out, and you go, yep. So okay, this time the order of the cards is in a different way, and this time, you know, it means that you can't like use memorization to work out where the bosses are, because the dungeons work on a sort of like on a tier system. So there's like a floor plan that's like randomly generated, and the rooms are randomly generated, and the enemies are randomly generated, and I assume that there's some kind of like algorithm underneath that saying like what level of enemies get put in, and the odds of, you know, basically on like the, once you walk in, you're not going to end up with like total boss man just like womping your ass in like room 1, but you can immediately turn left and find the boss of that level of the dungeon and like fight that mini boss. And then when you fight that mini boss, you go down a tier, and then you're like, you know, in the next depth, like a floor down, if you will, of the dungeon, and you basically do that a couple of times until you get like the main boss of the dungeon. And then once you do that, like, you unlock a whole like new biome of new dungeon. I think there are like 4 total ones in the game, so there's not like that much going on. And the game's only like, I think like 11 or 12 hours in total, you know, which is standard indie fare.
Perfect.
But
Perfect
yeah,
length for a game.
it's yeah, but it's still a lot of like grindiness. If you think like you're gonna just go, obviously half of your playtime's taken up by this by running the shop and upgrading the shop and upgrading the town, which I hadn't mentioned. But you have the money earned from the shop, and you can go to the center of town and basically pay for new merchants to come in. That's how you get like the blacksmith and the potion salesman and the item shop and stuff like that. So you can put them in the town. So you have to earn money to give yourself the opportunity to spend more money, and you're kind of doing this like neighborhood rejuvenation project. I don't know, like you're doing like the town a favor by having the successful business and then reinvesting in the area. And that's cool as well, because that's essentially like you're leveling up as well. That's how you get new weapons and better items and stuff like that. You have to invest in the other local businesses and in your own shop, because you sort of like min-maxing how much you can earn and how quickly you can flog all your wares, because you can upgrade the shop to like have bigger display tables. So you start by being able to only have 4 items on display at once, and then you can upgrade to have more space for sellable items, and then you kind of like run between the shop front and your room at the back where and you just like throw out more items onto the table and say how much they cost, and then you watch people potter in and out as you're doing that. So it's nice, it's fun. It's not too serious. It's not filled with like loads of lore. There's like,
it sounds like the shortcomings of this one are due to the fact that it's their first offering. It's a very small studio type. These are things you would naturally expect for a first time game, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't even think they're bad. I don't think it's not like, I don't think that was the kind of game they were trying to make either, so I don't know even if they are shortcomings. They're shortcomings for what certain players might want.
Yes.
But I don't know how much the studio themselves have actually failed at what they set out to do, because it feels like this is the game they wanted to make, and it seems that they've done that very well. They've wanted this really like light, casual experience. I mean, even from the writing, there is a bit of story and like, I can't. It's the guy who tells you like your granddad, the classic thing, like don't be like those other fools and like go too deep into the dungeons. Just keep the shop running and do this, and then you're like, no, fuck that. No, yeah, I'm gonna go as deep in the dungeon. There's better loot further down, and then I can unlock other dungeons and kind of do this cycle. But it will get a bit repetitive. For if you're not into a repetitive game, this is a repetitive game.
Well,
fair enough.
You do this loop, and that's it.
Right, yeah, but I mean, like you mentioned, there wasn't too many of those levels for the battles and things, and I'm sure. Well, I don't know, but I'm assuming when someone's starting out and they're creating their first game, and they've obviously got a limit on their time resource and their money resource to be able to do it. I'm sure there's loads of things they'd like to put in the game that they weren't able to.
Oh, possibly,
but
but I think more of it.
We had twice as many maps, or maybe we could add this element of gameplay. Like obviously, but I'm saying like you can't hold that against someone's game if it's the first game they're making, I guess.
No, and they have released some DLC which I haven't played, but I assume that's just to give you like more to the game. It's DLC. It's essentially an expansion pack. It's just more stuff to the game. But because of how often you bounce between these like two very different parts of the game, it stops it being too repetitive, especially since, as I said, you're doing both these parts of the game for like similar amounts of time. It's not like the problems you had with Pyre, Jim, where you're saying like, I'm enjoying this nice bit, and then they make me play this basketball game I don't like.
Yeah.
Whereas this one is like, it's both parts of the game. Obviously, if you don't like one of them, then it's going to be really hard to sell the game. Like, if you're like, oh, I wish I could just sit and manage the shop and not do anything.
Yeah.
In regards to the dungeon crawling, then you're not going to like it, and vice versa. If you're like, oh, I like the dungeon crawler, but I don't want to manage the shop. Like, there's no way around it. You have to kind of like both of these.
Yeah.
And that kind of worked for me because I do like, management sims and business sims and SimCity and, any game that has like the word tycoon on the end of it. And this is a very light version of it, but because it's got these like tiny little things, and I'm like, yeah, min-maxing this stuff, optimizing processes, like loving it. And then you're like, cool, that little like, the shop was open and then it turns to night and you have to close the shop. You're not allowed to just have the shop open as long as you want. That forces you to go. If you really wanted, you can just go to bed and like not go in the dungeons, but then you'd have no product to sell.
Yeah.
So then you go, and I think that I haven't timed how long these segments take, but I think like it's probably only a few minutes at a time. Like I think the shop, like the day-night cycle whilst the shop's open, can't be more than 5 minutes.
All right. Okay.
Like it's probably like 5 minutes of watching little NPCs potter in your shop, look at the wares, the little emoji pops up. You have to walk over the till to ring it up, but that is literally just walk over and press X, and don't keep people waiting too long, kind of thing, and you're just running back and forth. Bit like it would be underselling if I called it like something like Diner Dash or one of those like stupid games like that. But sort of like a chilled version of these games where you're just pottering back and forwards. You go, oh, there's nothing on display for them. I'll quickly run at the back and open the chest and like grab some shares out of there, and then I'll put that on the table and set its price if I haven't ever sold it before. check what the reactions to the prices were previously, and so on and so forth. And then it turns to night and the shop shuts, and it gives you a little summary of how much money you've earned and how much stuff was sold. And then you go right into the dungeon for 5-10 minutes or whatever. And you can always just like call it a day whenever you want in the dungeon. You have like an escape button. You have an amulet that releases you from the dungeon once you're done. But it does cost you to use it. Okay. So you can't just like keep going in and bailing immediately, because it costs you to use it, and the more you use it, the more it costs you to use it.
Oh, right, yeah, okay.
But it's not like huge, but it does mean you can't just go in, kill a baddie, and then jump out of the dungeon. Like, you want to be in for a few minutes, and then if your health's really low and you're like, I'm out of potions or whatever, you're like, right, that is like the ejector seat for this run.
Mm-hmm. Sounds very roguelike.
Yeah. Roguelite. I found this out between the last time we were recording Archie, the difference between roguelike and roguelite.
Okay.
And apparently the difference is roguelite is when there are elements that roll over to your next run, whereas roguelike, you lose everything.
Oh, okay.
Like, everything's gone. So if there's no permanence between runs,
it's roguelite.
Then it's roguelike.
Okay. So Spelunky's roguelike, Void Bastards is roguelite. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That's how it works. So this, but I mean,
that makes sense, I guess.
Use them for ages I've used them interchangeably, but this is kind of helpful because I think they do make like two completely different types of game.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think roguelike is you choose to start your game and look at the draw. That might be the run where you complete it, or you might get like a really shit hand. Roguelite, you'll always sort of be making forwards progress even through failure. And I think that's like a huge difference.
Fair enough.
In terms of the difficulty curve. But yes, it's roguelite, so when you die, yes, you lose everything in your dungeon, but it doesn't like start the whole game over. So I guess like within the dungeon, it's roguelike, but the whole game is roguelite.
Got you.
Because you keep your shop, you keep your upgrades. It lets you say, do you want to like just run through that dungeon again?
Mm-hmm.
And you crack on. And
would you recommend it though?
I would definitely recommend it. I've really been enjoying it, and I think it's a game like the kind of games I like, where you can just like throw it on and go.
Mm-hmm.
You could play it for 10 minutes and just do like a day-night cycle and then call it at that. Like, I'm not a huge fan of like idle clicker games, but I can get like draw.
What's an idle clicker game?
Cookie Clicker's the famous one, where basically you click to give you a cookie chip, and then you click again, and you just keep clicking loads, and then once you've got,
I think I have played something like that, like Clicker Heroes or something like that. Yeah, I think I have.
Yes, there was another one called what's he called? Venture Capitalist was one where you just like click a button to give you like $1, mm-hmm. and then when you've got $100, you can buy something to like automatically click for you.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and like that's like the ultimate level of grind on that side. But this game has like it doesn't have you doing anything as like mundane as that, but it is repetitive, but it is kind of like nice where you go, I can see the appeal of just having progression. Like I like the progression. Your brain likes the progression. That's the fun. But at least in this game, you've been challenged to get it. Even if on the other hand, it's not very challenging running the shop.
Yeah.
The shop is the chill bit, but that's like sort of where all your hard work turns into progress, ironically, even though you'd think it'd be from the dungeon crawling. You'd think like, oh yeah, I beat this boss and yada yada yada, and it's like, yeah, but you haven't earned shit yet. Not until you've sold this stuff and done like the shop side of it. This is all for out. All these cool items you just plundered provide you with zero progress until you put them on the shop floor and do that part of it, which is really chill because it kind of like almost like solidifies or internalizes like all your hard work, and you get to just like sit there casually going, yep, this is it, living the dream. Ringing the cash register, you're like, ka-ching, money in the bank, yes, That was worth it. Remember when I was really stressed like 5 minutes ago and I was like going, quick, hold down circle to use the amulet to get out of there before I lose my last hit point. Then you sat in the shop going, yeah, come on, cough it up. Look at all these good wares I've got. And it's a really like repetitive but nice loop.
Okay.
And the balance between the highs and the lows is really what sells it for me. It has this nice dynamism to it.
Sweet.
Sounds like a good time.
Yes, sounds better than Pyre. Should we do a pick of the podcast then?
Alright, let's go.
Archie, what are you feeling, Pyre or Moonlighter?
I'll go with Moonlighter. I was not sold on Pyre. But I don't think James was trying to sell me on Pyre, so...
I don't think James was trying to tell anyone to really open the wallet.
I see for myself, but I'd probably go to Moonlighter first.
Costume quest for me. I feel this is I think this is the vote that comes down to James, because obviously you weren't a fan of your game, Jim, and as Archie said, I don't think you were trying to sell any of us on it anyway. So
it depends if you like the sound of a basketball game. If you love that, then you'll go play it. Like
I don't think that, like, I'm not into sport anyway, but mention basketball, I couldn't be
it's not
like
basketball,
even less
actually.
interested.
It's not basketball. It is like a. I mean, that's actually, to be fair, you know what? That's the closest thing I can think of. Anyway,
It's definitely basketball.
I think just because there's a bit more to it, I'd probably go Moonlighter.
Okay.
Yours sounded good as well as a difficult pick. Yours sounded, but maybe just because there's a tiny bit more to it, from the sounds of it anyway. I think I enjoy the idea that you get to find items and then go sell them. It's like the behind the scenes, what goes on in a fantasy world situation.
Yes.
So
how the sausage gets made.
Yeah, it sounds like fun.
Excellent.
Cushion.
Well, I guess we'll leave it there. Thank everyone for listening, and tell them about all the good stuff that we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, and we'll see you next time. Ta-ra!
Ta-ra!
Ta-ra.